Today, there's such a big buzz about mid-length surfboards. Mid-length surfboards right now. I just thought I'd spend some time talking about them. I started out. I built a couple hundred surfboards, and then I got a job for G&S, and I've told the story many times, but I started out in the summer when they were super busy and they needed some backup, and I came in the afternoons, and I had a space next to Skip Fry, and I got to know Skip, and we spent some time together. We became friends, surfed and hung out, and but he was, Skip, I don't know, at least here in the States, he was probably like the egg guy, the double ender, and even as boards evolved, he continued to build and ride boards that look a lot like today's mid-length boards. And as time went by, different different fads, fashions, whatever, in design passed through, came and went, and some stayed. And to me, a mid-length surfboard was anything between 7 and 8 feet long, and didn't necessarily have to be kind of a double ender, but I usually made mid-length boards for a little bit bigger guys. They're still fun. They're still loose. Kind of have mellower lines, I guess, is the way to put it. And so yeah, I have, for me, the Moby Fish was kind of my mid-length board. I designed and rode the first one over 20 years ago, and I loved it from the first time I rode it. It has great range, and a lot of good surfers here in town, their dads had them, and then they got on them and they started riding them and they loved them, as an alternative to the short boards. And you fast. So I made them all along, and I've made eggs for 50 years too. So it's like it's nothing new to me, and I've made them continuously for 50 years. And for me, an egg is like a double ender. The nose and the tail 16 and a half. Maybe the nose slightly wider than the tail. The wide pointed, at the middle or slightly forward, the balance point. And, the bottoms over the years, they went from kind of, the Wayne Lynch heavily rolled bottom, when he broke out in 68, 69. And, as the years went by and bottoms progressed, a lot of eggs still kind of kept their old vibe with a more neutral or a more convex bottom. And so in the last few years, they've become, they're kind of the hip, cool underground thing. And I like Torren Martin's, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Torren Martin's videos. I've watched them, and every time I watch them, they grow on me more and more. And I'm not sure how long that board is he's riding. It's a twin fin with four channels, and it's kind of a double ender, a narrower mid-length. But I love his style. I think he's surfing really well on it. And Devin Howard on the CIs. Devin's a San Diego boy, and I've watched him surf for 40 plus years, and he's a natural spokesperson for the mid-lengths. That's his gig. He rode longboards quite well for years and years, but watching some of the promotional videos of Devin riding the CI mid-lengths, he's surfing very clean on them. And I get a lot of guys that have just they've had their first board for a while, and it's not to generalize, but it's probably a 8-foot wave storm, maybe a 9-foot wave storm, and they want to get on a short board. They want to jump on a 510 SD or a high performance short board off of a big 8 or 9-foot softboard, and there's several things wrong with that. I think the average person these days is riding a board way too small. I try to gently guide some customers that are 6'4" and 240 pounds, and they want a 5'8" that's 27 liters. And in the end, the customer's right. But usually, I can talk some sense into them. But I have a on the website. I have all these little short Word documents because a lot of questions get asked over and over again, and one of them is moved down in size slowly. And basically, I suggest 6 inches is a good amount of length to step down. So if you're riding a 8-foot wave storm, guess what? A 7.6 mid length is a perfect transition board for you. And so, the timing is pretty good because there's been an injection of a lot of new surfers, a lot of them coming off big soft boards, and the problem is they all want to go too short, too fast. And that's a good thing because it won't catch as many waves. But in reality, I think they'd be much happier on a mid length, and I try and tell them that. Look, as you progress and you feel like you're ready for something short, keep the mid length because it'll be a board that serves you well. The rest of your career. You ride the thing for 20 years and have a blast on it. On the small, fun days or the mushy days or whatever, or even the good days. They surf quite well on a good surf. So we've bent to the curve. We're offering an egg. We'll have it up on our site probably in the next month. So the eggs I build. Some people build the noses really wide. Some people build them with the wide points back. People build them kind of narrower. Some people call a 6'10" a mid-length. I don't. You got to be over 7 foot to be a mid-length board. 7'6" to me strikes me as the perfect length for a mid-length board. But we'll be promoting it on the site. And my boards, most of my boards are balanced. The thickness is pretty balanced. Outline on the high-performance short boards, sure, the nose is 1.5 inches. Sometimes 2 inches narrower, but the trend has been over the last few years is to have the wide points crept up just a bit, and the noses are becoming 1.5 inches, maybe 1.25 inches narrower than the tail. And I have, if I have the keg is the balance point's pulled pretty far back. The back half of the board's a fair bit thicker than the front half, and that kind of forces you to stay back on the tail more. And then some of the step-up boards, the noses are slightly, 0.05 of an inch, maybe. Some boards 1/10 of an inch thicker, at the 1 foot mark, 18-inch mark. They're not much, but they're a little bit. And that balance changes the way the board paddles and the way the board surfs and how the lines it draws. We're gonna. I can build, if somebody likes the mid-length template outline. I suppose I could make it 6'6". I suppose I could make it 9 foot long, but my mid lengths are pretty balanced. The wide point's pretty centered, maybe 1 inch forward on the bigger boards. And then behind that, we have a squash tail mid length coming and I really like the looks of that one. Its nose is slightly narrower than the eggs. Tail's about maybe a fraction wider. It's still, the wide point's still about, at the middle, and it's got good tail rocker and a moderate amount of nose rocker. And we debated over the name for a while, and I said, well, let's call it the squag, the squash egg, and not many people like that name, so I went back to my original name, which is the egg knot, and so you'll be seeing that in a couple months. So that's a variation on the egg, and I mentioned the rockers. A lot of the mid-length boards you see out there have pretty low entries, which is I think is good, because the board gets up in planes faster, it catches waves easier, it carries through sections better. The older mid-lengths used to have fairly straight tail rockers too, and I think as time has gone by, we've realized that the back third of a board is I've always called it the business center, or the control point, the sweet spot. But I've got actually not a lot of rocker in my mid lengths, but a fair bit of tail rocker. But the entry rockers are a little bit lower, and the bottoms are typically a slight release up front in the nose, just because of the width. It helps it, keeps it free. On the shorter mid lengths, maybe a slight concave in the middle, and that develops quickly into a double barrel V on the shorter, and on the longer mid lengths, I take those concaves out of the V panels, and I have basically a double V, and the double barrel, the double concave V is great for generating speed, but in terms of looseness, a smaller board you can overpower. That's why, right now, I'm doing some boards that have almost a third of an inch of single concave in the bottom, and I see, there's a lot of the good surfers. I see, guys on sharp eyes, and you can tell by the lines they're drawing and the arc of the surfboard that they have some pretty serious, tail rocker and heavy concave. They just can't. They don't really plane. They have to be pushing on one rail or the other, and they're pretty tight arcs. So, back to the mid-length. As they get bigger, I believe you just have much more planing area, and you're going to be getting your speed from the lower entry, the planing area, and you need a little looser bottom. And my feelings are, as a flat V is a little bit looser. It doesn't add as much drive or speed, but it's it helps the bigger boards keep the rails free, helps it go on rail easier, it helps keep the rails free. So that's it on it's a brief kind of a mention of the the eggs and the egg knots that we'll have coming out. Some shops already have eggs. Huntington Surf and Sports one, and PB Surf Shops one, and there's a few others. I guess now I'm looking for questions here. But in the meantime, maybe I'll shift gears and talk about our new model, the MISO. The MISO is, a hyper. It's kind of it's a growl. It was meant to be kind of a groveler. I worked initially with Jacob Skeasley on it, and he wanted to start out as a pool board, and so we knew it needed to be shorter, knew it needed more rocker and a little bit more width, and so the very first few ones were kind of aimed at the pole, but he ended up really liking him out in real waves. and we worked on it for months and built some for other people to try, and people, it was so well received, we just had to make that a model. And it runs, whatever your high performance shortboard length is, 5'10", 6'0", you should probably run it in a MISO about 2 to 4 inches shorter. And it's kind of like, in the late 70s, there was, there was the, early 70s, there was the fish, and the digress or transgress, whatever, a little bit here. The early fishes were off the evolution scale. They're Bob Simmons, and I think even Tom Blake has built some swallowtails, but Bob Simmons built some, and he built some two-fin ones, and then the Miranda brothers in La Jolla, 66, they made a swallowtail single fin, and then 67, it might have been late 66, they built twin fins. They were 8, 10, 9 foot, 9'2", real wide, still kind of like a longboard, but with a deep V cut in the tail, and then off each point of the tail there was a spine of a V panel that pointed towards the nose, and that ran up almost to the midpoint of the board. And then the two fins were placed on the outside of each of those V panels, so they had a lot of cant, and they were like cutaway fins, so the bases were a little bit narrower than the tips. And that was my first custom board. My first board was a used extreme asymmetrical. It was 9.3, and it was made for a regular foot, but I didn't know any better. I'm a goofy foot, but way too small for me. But my first custom board was that La Jolla Surfboards twin pin, and then I got another one, a shorter one, 7.6. But the World Contest in San Diego, 72, I believe. Let me back up a little bit. Steve Liss wandered into the Miranda Brothers surf shop, which is at the top of Tourmaline, and he was tripping. He was a knee boarder, surf new break, and he was tripping on the twin fin designs. And so he went home and he made some very short, very flat swallowtail fish boards, and they were gaining popularity. And down in his little part of the world, and news started to spread, and the World Contest came to San Diego in fall of 72, I believe, and it really wasn't the best choice. Half an hour north, tabletops. I remember surfing tabletop one day when the contest was on, and I heard the contest was 2 to 3 foot and crummy. And they're all, hopping, trying to link sections on fishes. And I was surfing tabletops. It was 4 to 5 foot and growing. And I heard Orange County was like solid 6 foot. But so David Nueva got I can't remember if it was a Liss fish, maybe, and he won the contest. And Jimmy Blears from Hawaii came in second on a fish, and so that launched the whole fish craze. And then shortly after that, there was rocket fishes that were a little bit narrower in the nose and tail, and like 14 and a half, 15-inch noses and 14-inch tails, and they're single fins, but they had a swallowtail with like an in-between outline, in between a regular shortboard and a fish. And they became a little popular, but the MISO kind of it doesn't really look back at the rocket fishes, but it kind of fills the void between the fishes and the not so much the stump thing, but it fills the void between the fishes and regular performance shortboards. So it's a 5/8. I build a guy 160, 70 pounds. I build him a 5/8. 20 3/4, like a 15 and a half nose, and a 16 and change tail. And I've always liked swallowtails with wings. Nice crisp turn. The wing provides a pivot point, and you can ride them any fin arrangement really. You can ride them as a tri-fin. They work good. I think they work best as quads. You can't really ride them as twins unless the twin fin boxes need to be back a couple of inches, just the way twin fins are. But in the MISO's got a fair bit of rocker for a short kind of meant to be a groveler, but it's got pretty good range because of the rocker. It's got a fair bit of tail rocker and a decent amount of nose rocker. And the bottom is flat entry and shallow, like a 1/10 of an inch concave in the middle, and then it splits into a double barrel V. And to me, a V is when the rail line is higher, the center line is higher than the rail line. So if you try to put a straight edge across the bottom, you can't touch both rails at the same time, if that makes sense. So the spine is higher than the rails, and so it runs about 0.15 to 0.18 on the spine, but they're dished out doubles, and we just started promoting it, and it's really people are definitely digging it, especially with summer right around the corner. What else? Questions? What do you think about the enough said? Oh, here's one. Since I'm on the MISO, do you like the MISO as a thruster, twin, or quad? I kind of answered that. I'm a quad guy, and I always watch YouTube surf videos at night, and I was watching some videos that were comp videos about 10 years ago, and it was interesting because Kelly was riding 4 fins, and as I predicted in a Surfline blog I wrote about 15 years ago, the quads are insane, and unless Kelly rides them, nobody else will ride them. And so Kelly was riding them, and so everybody else, Joel Parkinson and a lot of the other top pros were riding quads. And I imagine in their spare time they ride them. I like them. I worked with Glenn Winton on quads in the early 80s, and I remember one time I built them. It was a contest up in Oceanside at the jetty, and we built. He liked the hull, but the fins weren't right, and so the 4 fins these are glass-ons too, and we moved them around about 4 or 5 times, and finally nailed it. But those quads are a little bit different than the ones today. But about mid 90s, had a North County team rider try. It was actually one of I'm blanking on his name. He's a NorCal shaper. Anyways, he had borrowed one of the Fletcher's quads and loved it and bought it for me to look at, and I ride boards a lot bigger than most people, and so I made him a couple and he loved them, and so I made myself one. And after the very first time I rode the quad, I just went, man, there is so much more to like about the way a quad rides. I swear it paddles faster, it catches waves easier, you can pull your line into the wave face sooner. It feels like it has no top end in the speed. Tri-fins go fast, but quads go faster. And the one thing you can't do on a quad, you can't jam turns. You can't. They really want to glide through the arc, and on cutbacks they build speed. I mean, my first cutback I did it when I almost fell off because I'm used to at best maintaining speed through the cutback, but it accelerated. And I was going back at the wave faster than I came away from it. But anyways, so yeah, the long story short, I'm a big fan of quads, so it's probably not fair to ask me, but I think once most people do try a quad, they change their whole line of thinking. Um, Twin fins too. Twinsers, yeah, I've made some Twinser MISOs. They're all a little bit different feel. Um, but what do I think about the enough said? Gosh, the enough said is. I'm just going to look on my computer. Enough said. I think it's about. I don't know. Enough said was a Josh Kerr model, and it had for the time it had a fairly aggressive concave. There it is. Yeah, it's a thumbtail, and it's kind of like what a little bit like what the Hobgoods rode too, but it was definitely a Kerr model, and it had pretty heavy concave for the time, and I still get quite a few orders for them. Just off the top of my head, it's yeah. I mean, it's got moderate, point two, up to a quarter inch concave, which is, I mean, in this day and age, that's, like I said, some of the boards are reaching point three, 0.35. But the Enough-Stead's still a very valid shape, and as I said, I'm getting quite a few orders. It's got typically it's got about a 2-inch difference between the nose and the tail, and the wide point's back about 2.5 inches. So it's I said earlier that wide points have crept up, up to 1.5 inches, sometimes 1 inch. I mean, the difference between the nose and the tail. The noses are more like 1.5 inches narrower, and some 1.25 inches narrower, and the wide points have crept up. But the boards are being ridden shorter too. So yeah, the S-Thanks is still a legit high performance shortboard. Brittany joined. Well, Brittany, Brittany, you're on. She wants to talk about her artwork. All right, you got 10 seconds, Brittany. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0. Um, a hustler is magic. Um, yeah, the hustlers are, along with the dwarts, the SDs, blackbirds, and the 419s and the Moby fishes. The hustlers is one of our all-time most popular, not groveler, but a small wave board. And for those of you that aren't familiar with them, um, they have, uh, it's a swallow wing, and it is, um, it's it's got a little bit fuller nose, say a 6'2" that's 21.5 inches wide, has a 14 nose and a 16 tail, and uh, and it's got a swallow. It's got a swallow. It's got actually interesting because the split tails have so many different names, but uh, the straight cut between the corners, I always used to call it dovetail, and so the hustlers have a hard wing dovetail board. Um, and it's got a fuller rail. But the main thing about it is it's got a little bit lower rocker and a little bit flatter deck. And the main thing about the Hustler is it's got a Venturi bottom, and Venturis are legit. I mean, uh, the the Bonzers, Duncan and Malcolm Campbell, get a lot of credit for introducing those Venturis, and they still have a solid following. We've incorporated a Venturi in several of our designs, and the Hustler is probably the most popular one. So I guess it basically helps the water accelerate through the fins, and you get a real definitive squirt out of the turns. And once again, they're meant for small surf, but they have pretty good range. I've had guys ride them in double overhead surf and loved them. 419 fish is great. Yeah. How did I get the name 419? It was 2 years ago. It was April 19th, 2019, I think. It's just, names for surfboards. I don't know. It just, everybody's got so many different models, and sometimes you kind of go with serious names. Other times you just go with complete nonsensical names, and I don't know. I've been doing, once again, I've been doing fishes for 50 years, but I wanted to modernize the fish a little bit, and give it not so much more nose rocker, because that's part of the beauty of a fish is how flat the entry is and how well it planes, but a little bit more tail rocker and a little bit um, more V off the corners, and not as wide of a split as a traditional fish. But people go, how'd you come up with that? What's 419 mean? I go, April 19th. So I don't know. Names you go through the different names, and like the Neil, that's our diamond tail. Neil Diamond is, so we just called it Neil for short. Uh, High performance sports. Keg, that's Wade. His nickname is a Keg. Um, Barking Spider, I don't know, you have to ask my son. He named that one. Uh, and so forth. But Let me show you. This part of my office, different boards. This is a Canyon TriStar. Sorry if I'm. It's an early tri-fin. 81 maybe. This is a little board I made for my the guy that owned Canyon Surfboards, his daughter. Here's a, let's see it. There's a traditional fish from the Canyon days. Wakeboard, we made those in the early 90s. Bat tail. Channel bottom twin fin with GNS removable fins. The music from '73. That was a early rusty surfboard and so forth. So here's one of JoJo's tow boards, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I guess. So. I'm pretty rookie with this Instagram live camera thing, so I hope you got a chance to catch a couple of those older boards. What are your thoughts on channels leading to the tail? As far as I know, the first channels were introduced by an Australian shaper in the mid '70s, and my thought, they were deep channels. They ran off the tail, and they became quite popular amongst like the Bali crew, and then made their way into the mainstream in the late '70s. I remember having some, some 6 deep channel boards at the end of the single fin era, and they were quite well actually. They a very distinctive feel. They went on a rail nice. They accelerated. There was a noticeable acceleration. With a single fin, the good ones would accelerate with a good board and a good fin, but a lot of times the board just kind of changed direction. With the channels, it would draw your turns out longer, but you would get acceleration, and it would hold the line, especially hold the line in a clean barrel. Channels didn't really like bumpy surface conditions. But as we got into the early '80s and tri-fins, they started coming in all kinds of variations. I mean, I remember in the late '70s making an egg, a single fin egg, for this guy with 10 deep channels. I got a picture of it somewhere. I'll try and post it. But, 10 deep channels on a single fin egg in '78, I think. Bill Castor was my hero at that time, and brilliant San Diego craftsman. He made Chris O'Rourke's boards, and a lot of them were beautiful channel bottoms. So yeah, they started out as, who knows, maybe in the '50s somebody made channel bottoms. That's the way surfboard design is. There's somebody claims they're the first, they're not. They may have evolved it. I mean, Simon Anderson gets credit, and credit is due for the first tri-fin. but there was tri-fins. I talked to Carl Ekstrom from time to time when I see him, and we always get into a little bit of history. And he said, "Oh yeah, I made them in the mid '60s." But I'm digressing here. So in the early '80s, with tri-fins coming, you didn't the boards didn't they held they accelerated. It was a whole new era, and the people still were playing around with channels, and thus the belly channels came along, and those are channels that start just behind the midpoint of the board, and they're the deepest in front of the fins, and then they fade out as they go through the fins, and the last few inches of the tail, there's no sign of a channel. And they were usually four. People played around with pointing them at the nose or running them parallel or whatever. And but usually there were four channels, and they weren't as deep. Maybe excuse me, a quarter inch is the deepest. Maybe the deep channels, some of those things got ridiculously deep, half inch or more. But so the channels, as the years went by, and the tri-fins became more and more evolved, as they evolved, and more work was done with concaves, single concave, single double. Channels kind of disappeared, but I see them. I mentioned Torrin Martin earlier. He had four pretty deep channels on the board, on a couple of those movies he's in. But we like the blade. We have two versions of the blade. One is with a fairly deep concave, and the other is with not much lateral break in the bottom, but it's got medium deep channels off the tail. And once again, those are sort of designed to give more drive and more hold. So channels, I mean, it's all good, but there's so many other things to experiment these days. There's all this talk about what's the difference between a MISO and a hatchet? The difference between a MISO and a hatchet, there's a world of difference. The MISO has got a little bit fuller of an outline, but the main thing, the hatchet is it's part of our flat deck family, whereas the MISO has got a traditional crown deck. The MISO's got, per inch has more rocker than the hatchet. The hatchet's it's a very popular kind of a everyday board too. The best, I'm not gonna go there. Is the MISO similar to the Hipster C5? Once again, the Hipster C5 was the C5s. Probably most of you haven't heard of them. They're a spin-off of the Twinzer boards. They were popular. I'd have to go back and check, but they were popular like in the early '90s, and Martin Potter kind of put them on the face of the earth, and Will Jobson from Huntington Beach gets the credit for introducing them, and then Glenn Manami, I believe, shaping a lot of Platts boards that year. He won a title, I believe. And it's the Twinser's a twin fin with a little leading canard, I guess. You look, it's. I don't know that much about sailing. I've got some books on sailing theory, but there's a small sail in front of the big sail that helps feed the big sail, and you can feel it. I mean, my first Twinser, I kind of freaked out because I almost couldn't feel the fin, the big fin, because the small fin did such a good job of feeding the water into the big fin. And so, I worked with Will for a year or two. I had a license agreement, and they were pretty popular. And Stu Kenson, who's a great shaper these days, in the early days, he used to work as a sander for us, and then he was a partner in a surf shop in IB. Um, but I loaned him one of my Twinsers to try, and he freaked out. And to this day, I think, more than anyone, probably Stu is the go-to Twinser guy. Um, and so the Hipster was a kind of an offshoot of the Twins, of the Hipster C5 was an offshoot of the Twinser. And we had a contest, anything but three. We had a C5 challenge, and then we had anything but three at Blacks. C5 was at Trestles, and I think that anything but three was at Blacks. But anyways, kind of a ramble session. Out of time. Hope you all get some good surf here in the next month, and stay healthy. Take care.